So, but what got us even motivated to come to Alaska was my grandfather in the probably about 56 or 57. He was a trapper hunter out of Montana. And things had changed so much in Montana where they were restricting things down even in those days. And so Alaska was a huge adventure to him, and he came to Alaska, and he would go hunting and trapping, and he would go down on the Aleutian Islands in different places, the Alaska Peninsula, and stay for sometimes a year at a time.
And he actually wrote a book on that, didn't he?
He did write a book about it, about his adventures, and it's pretty interesting. He was very hardcore Alaska person at that. And
well, there was a newspaper article about him too. Wasn't that in Anchorage or something?
It was in the Anchorage, I believe it was the Anchorage Times. And they did a huge article about him that was like 2 or 3 pages. And I still have some copies of that. And that would have been, when they did that, that was like in the early 80s after he'd released this book. And how he did the book was he was flying out in the States, and he sat next to a lady who was a publisher. And she started asking him some questions where he was from, because he was quite a character. He always dressed in sealskin boots and sealskin beret. He had a sealskin jacket with him all the time. And so she got really interested and just kept interviewing him, and then made contact with him later. And between the two of them, they put this book together about his adventures down out of Tugidak, and where he would go on these hunting adventures.
Wow.
But in '63, my dad came up with him to see what this was all about up here, and he went down on the Aleutians, and they went seal hunting, because at that time there was a bounty on seal. And then they would sell the hides. And so Grandpa and Dad, they went out on this island, Tugidak Island it's called, and they had a little dugout. There's no trees or anything. It's just a windswept island, and these seals would come in and bring their calves in there, and they were doing their seal hunting. But they lived in a dugout with driftwood inside of a berm, a wind-blowing berm, like we would see a wind-blowing snow berm. They just dug out and made a little camp in there.
So just use the driftwood as like a hatch or a door to keep the wind, yeah.
Right. They would use the driftwood to kind of help seal that and hold it up and everything, because it was sand too.
Oh, man.
And so they were constantly having to clean it out and make it, so it didn't just collapse in on them.
Oh, man.
And they went out there and they got dropped off. Well, the bad part they were flown out, and the people forgot to come get them. And 6 months later, they were able to flag down a passing fishing boat, and they just happened to see my dad on the beach, and they sent a skiff over and wanted to see what was going on. And Dad said, well, we've been stranded here for 6 months.
Oh, man.
We need to, when you get back to Tugidak, could you have them come get us, And they were very lucky, because they were running out of course, they'd run out of a lot of their staples food.
Yeah.
And Dad was shooting geese with a .22, and he had a .222 and a .22, but they were starting to run out of ammunition.
Wow.
And he said when we got really low on ammunition, he said I would make sure that 2 of them were lined up together so I could get 2 in one shot.
Wow.
And my dad and my grandfather were excellent shots and very patient, but that's how they survived.
How long did they plan on being out there?
They only planned on being there like 2 months.
Wow.
And so they really didn't have supplies either for 6 months. And they were trying to get whatever they could out of the ocean or anything that might have washed up on the beach. And they got to the point where Dad spent all his time trying to get food, any kind of food that they could. Yeah.
It's lucky they survived that. You got to have the right mindset for that.
Very much so. Yeah. When Dad came home, he was so skinny I almost didn't recognize him, and because him and my grandfather lost so much weight during that
Wow.
little adventure there. But,
It's amazing after that adventure that they still want to move to Alaska.
well, Dad, yeah, and he wanted to come back more than ever then, after he'd been here and been through all that. And he knew that this was the land of opportunity, and it still is in a lot of ways, but you do have to have the right mindset and work at it. Nobody's going to give it to you.
Yeah.
And that was a huge thing that he installed in all of us kids was if you want something, you have to work for it. And you have to have the right mindset and don't give up. And but yeah, Dad and Grandpa, they were lucky to have survived that. And they were not happy with I know that airline is no longer in flying down there, but because this was so many years ago.
Yeah.
But what they would fly them in is these goose. They're called a goose, and they land either in the ocean or on land. And they'd land in the ocean, then drive up on the beach. And so a few days later, one finally came and picked them up. And they were 6 months late. Of course, at that time, you don't sue anybody. You might chew on them a little, but that would be the end of it.
Wow.
I can't. Go ahead.
That's quite a story.
Yeah, I can't imagine being stuck out there for, let alone 2 months,
Right.
and then
right.
6 months. And how does somebody forget about you?
Right.